Yo, what is happening, guys? It is Scorpionz, and I am so freaking happy to be finally bringing you my guide on how to play the pig in Dead by Daylight. I know it's been 2 years since I've started streaming, and I've only just made a guide. I know. But here we are, it's finally here. This guide is going to show you the beginnings of how to play the pig, the advanced on how to play it, where to dash, where not to dash, how to dash in certain tiles, how to use the stealth, how to trap properly. It will show you good builds, it will show you some good add-ons, and it will show you how to play against her as Survivor. So even if you don't play as her ever, you still might learn a thing or two from this video. A lot of work has gone into this by myself and a lot of other people, so I'd appreciate it if you leave a like. In the description below, a lot of different areas in the guide are going to be time-stamped because this video is going to be a lengthy one because I wanted to try and pack everything possible into one video. I made sure everything is time-stamped properly to allow you to navigate the video easier rather than just watching the entire thing. So let's get straight into the video. So I think it'll be best to start with who she actually is and what her power actually does. So who is she? Well, she is Amanda Young from Saw. She is the 4th licensed killer added to this game. She's a 4.6, 32 meter tear radius killer. Her power is pretty complex, honestly. The best way for me to describe the power to you is to split it up into 3 categories, which is the crouching and stealthing, the ambush dash, and the traps being by far the most complex bit to describe. So the crouching and stealthing is pretty simple, honestly. You press the active ability button, which is whatever it is for you, and she crouches down. Takes 1.3 seconds to crouch. Once she's crouched, her heartbeat fades down to 0. She gains the undetectable status effect, which means that she is immune to all aura reading perks. She has no red light, etc., so you can just sneak around, completely unseen. Sneak around, sneak up to gens, etc., etc. Pretty straightforward. The ambush, again, to describe is pretty straightforward, but we'll be going into this in detail a lot later. You can find that in the description where that actually is in the video. While she's crouching, she has the ability to launch herself forward in an ambush sprint, basically. Charges up for a short while, and then she lunges forward at any killer's regular lunge speed, which is 6.9 meters a second for, well, the dash is 2 seconds, so 6.9 meters for 2 seconds. And she launches herself forwards with complete control over the dash, so it's very good at countering things like power loops, etc., etc. Again, we're going into that a lot later on in the video. And the third and final thing is the traps. This is probably the most complex bit of the power to describe because there's a lot to this. Effectively, Pig spawns in with 4 at base, 4 inactive reverse bear traps. When you're standing over a survivor that's in the dying state, you get the ability to place one of these helmets on the survivors. And effectively, what the survivor has to then do is remove the helmet at one of the 4 jigsaw boxes that have spawned in across the map. Once the helmet's placed, the survivor sees where the boxes are in a white aura, and the pig can see where the boxes are at all times. So yeah, you place the helmet, they have to then go remove the helmet. The helmet itself does nothing, it's inactive until a generator pops, and once a gen pops, the helmet becomes active, and at that point, a 2.5 minute timer at base starts in the helmet, and if the survivor fails to remove the helmet in those 2.5 minutes, then they die. It kills them. So yeah, you got 2.5 minutes, and while it's active, you cannot escape the trial through an exit gate. You can jump in the hatch, but you can't escape through an exit gate when it's active. If it's not active, you can. So yeah, there's a lot to the power. There's a lot to the power, a lot of really cool strats you can do with the power, etc. So we're probably going to start off with explaining the crouch and the stealth in a bit more detail, how to gen grab, etc, etc. Stuff like that. So here's where I'm going to split the power up into a bit and go into a bit more detail about the three things. So starting off with the crouching, pressing control, it takes the pig 1.3 seconds at base to crouch. And during that time, she slows down at a steady rate from 4.6 meters a second to 3.6 meters a second. And upon reaching 3.6 meters, upon the crouch animation ending, the heartbeat begins to fade, and that takes an additional 4 seconds. So after pressing the active ability button, it takes 5.3 seconds total for you to completely lose your heartbeat as the pig. Your red light, however, disappears the moment you're done crouching. So that doesn't fade, that's just, it's on for the 1.3 seconds you're crouching, and then once you're done crouching, it turns off. It's gone. It is worth noting that while you're crouch walking, you are unable to grab people off of gens or any interactable objects. So the only way you can grab with pig is by standing up, and for that you have to commit through the entire 1.3 second animation again, and then upon the animation ending you can instantly grab. Interesting thing as well is that your red lights and your terror radius are completely gone even while you are standing up as the pig. Your heartbeat and red light only start appearing after you've gone through the entire 1.3 second animation of standing up. Your red light insta appears like it did before, how it instantly turned off, and your heartbeat fades out from where you're standing at a much quicker rate than it faded. It takes roughly a second and a half, around that sort of area to fade out. So it does give you the opportunity to quickly sneak up to somebody on a gen, for example, and stand up and pull them off of the gen. This all means that there ends up being some skill behind trying to grab with a pig. You can see in the clip above that you're going to want to try and time it so that you're done standing up the moment you are behind the survivor. So you can stand up and instantly interact with them and pull them off the generator. And to do that, you can see in the clip that I start standing up kind of around the corner away from them, a few meters away, so that I know by the time I'm done standing, I'm going to be right behind them and I can grab. Even if you get a false grab bug or whatever, you can still get a free M1 with pig in a lot of situations like this, so it ends up being very worth learning the timing on standing up. It is always better to stand up and go for a grab in this situation rather than ambushing them. Your ambush is for chasing, it is not really for attacking somebody working on a gen, because they might have sprint burst or whatever, you don't know. The best way to think about it is to think about the health states of the survivor. If you pull them off a generator, you effectively deal 2 health states of damage to the survivor because you grab them and you instantly put them on your shoulder. And if you mess up the grab, you will very often get the free M1. So in this situation, you either get 2 health states or you get 1 health state. If you ambush the gen instead, then you will guarantee that you're only going to get at least 1 health state. And even then, you actually might not get any because they'll hear your roar, they might have sprint burst, and if they have sprint burst, you get nothing. So you either get 1 health state or no health states by ambushing a gen, and you get 2 health states or 1 health state by going for the grab. It's always better to go for the grab. Honestly, that's kind of all there is to it with the crouching. You should be crouching a lot during chase to ambush dash, but we'll be getting into that into a lot of detail a lot later on. When you should actually crouch, as in when you should be doing it before you sneak up to the gen, is something that I'm probably going to cover in the perks area, because I want to talk about the build I use for that, and to do that, I'm going to wait until the perks area. So if you want to know about when to actually crouch to sneak up to a gen, look at the perks section in the description below. So the next thing to really talk about, to be honest, is the helmets, the traps. We've already mentioned kind of before how they kind of work, but now it's kind of talking about the strats behind the helmets and the thinking behind them. The traps, like I said before, are for slowing the game down, So you, as the pig, need to kind of think game by game at what point you actually need the game slowing down. So what I tend to do, in fact what I do almost every single game, is the first 4 people I down, I'll put a trap on their head. Because early game pressure is something you desperately need as a killer that has, well, normal movement speed. She has no way of getting from A to B quickly. So gaining early map pressure is always going to be a plus. So it's 99% of the time better to place your traps super early. First 4 you down, put the helmets on, gives you some bit of map pressure to work with, and then retain it once the helmets pop off. But like I said, this is a game by game thing. So if you do find yourself in a game where the survivors are going down quite quickly at the very beginning, then sometimes it actually might be better to save your helmets for later. If you feel like it's 3 gens left and gens are popping now, you might want to start busting out some helmets at this point. But most of the time, you'll be using them on your first down. There are some other strats when it comes to helmets, like you can specifically build for an endgame pig, which is very rare these days after the endgame change that happened a while ago. But it's still a possible thing that you can do. You can bring perks like Blood Warden, etc. like that, and you can save all of your traps to 1 gen and place your helmets on the survivors at 1 gen. This is one of those extremely high risk, high reward strats that I wouldn't really recommend you try hugely often, but like if you want to try it, it's there. Trapping at 1 gen, and then they potentially pop the last gen with the helmets on, and then once that happens, all you've got to do as killer is open the door and trigger endgame, because you're going to have 2 or 3 active helmets at that point in the endgame, and that is a very hard situation for them, plus Blood Warden, etc. It's cool when it works, but it's very hard to pull off. So, going into a little bit about the numbers behind it, I said before already, it takes 2.5 minutes by default for the helmet to explode once activated. Putting a trap on the head as the pig takes 3.3 seconds, so when you interact with a dying survivor, putting a trap on their head at base, 3.3 seconds and it's on their head, and searching a saw box for a survivor takes 12 seconds at base. And again, like I said before, the helmets are RNG, but it's not strictly true. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the helmets actually work. During the loading screen of the game, when you're initially loading into the match, the game actually picks the 4 saw boxes that the helmet's going to come off at. So basically, each helmet is given a key. Each key is then assigned to a random saw box. So all 4 keys could actually be in the same box, like one box could remove all 4 helmets, or they could all be in different ones, etc, etc. So the game already knows before you even trap anybody which helmet is being removed on which box. So the survivor just has to find the correct box. So rather than it being traditional RNG where it's, I don't know, a 25% chance, for example, it is actually a 0% chance in 3 of the 4 boxes, and the 4th box is an 100% chance to remove it. You could find the correct box first time, second try, third try, etc. And that's kind of how they work. And the last thing to mention is that the pig herself can see when traps are active, but she can't see the timer itself. The only way she gets an indication of how long it is until the helmet detonates is if she finds the survivor and sees the blinking light on the back of the helmet, whereas the survivor in the HUD can actually see their own timer and see how long it takes before they die. Although you're always better as the pig to ignore people that have helmets on, because these people are actively not doing gens, they're busy doing other things. So unless the survivor literally runs into you, or they're stupid to search a saw box next to you and chase or whatever, blah blah, there's a lot of situations. But other than those situations, it's always better to leave them and not towel them and just let them do their own thing, because it's always better to pressure those without helmets on, because people with helmets are very often not doing gens. So now we get to the most important part of the guide. So far up to now, we've merely been talking more about how she works rather than how to play her as such, because there's nothing amazingly skillful to learn about the traps, and the same thing goes with the crouching. There's a little bit, obviously, with chain grabbing, etc. But this part is about the ambush. This is the part of Pig that makes her unique, makes her so fun to play as and play against. And honestly, I have a lot to say about this. So to make this easier, I'm going to split the next part of the guide up into 3 parts. This is going to allow me to properly cover everything you're going to need to do with the dash, etc. So the 3 things you need to know about as a pig when you're dashing is how to double back fake, how to moonwalk with the dash, which for this video I'm going to call moon dashing, and how to fake your dash so you bait people away from the loop by pretending to do it and then actually cancelling it. Now, before getting into those 3 components, it's most important to me to talk about how the dash itself actually works as a power. So all the numbers behind it, etc. like that, because I feel like it will build up a good foundation to be able to build from there into actually how to dash. As I've mentioned previously, Piggy has the ability to crouch down into a stealth mode, allowing her to sneak around, etc. like that. But while also in the stealth mode, you have the ability to be able to dash. Now, this dashing works very similar to a regular lunge, except it's much, much longer. And while crouching, you can charge up your ambush. Now, charging up your ambush takes 0.75 seconds to do, but you have to keep in mind that while you're charging it, you slow down from your crouch movement speed as Pig, which is 3.6 to, you slow down from 3.6 to 0. You completely stop while charging. So near the end of the charge up, you are not moving, which you have to keep in mind as the Pig when you try and ambush. After the charge up, you sprint forward at 6.9 meters a second, which is every other killer's normal lunge speed. But rather than just doing a regular lunge, you sprint forwards for 2 seconds. For the first half a second of your dash, you're accelerating from 0 to 6.9. But after the half a second is gone, you are effectively in full control of your melee for 1.5 seconds at full speed. You have the ability to go forwards, sideways with dash. You can't traditionally go backwards, but there is a way to do it, which we'll be discussing later in the video. Now, something else to note is that your red stain and your terror radius both return during the dash. The red light appears immediately once the dash starts, and your terror radius takes about half a second to fully expand. The last basic thing to mention is that there's 2 audio cues surrounding the ambush. One of which is audible to both the killer and the survivor, and the second of which is only audible to the survivor. During the charge up of the dash, so there's the 3/4 of a second charge up, the Pig lets out a loud roar, both of which you as a killer can hear and you as a survivor can hear. This sound is very useful for you as a killer to be able to bait, etc., which we'll discuss later. But there's also a second sound emitted once the dash actually starts. The moment the ambush starts, a high-pitched kind of stinger noise is emitted in a 16-meter radius around the Pig, audible to only the survivors. This noise effectively lets them know you've fully committed to your dash and that you should watch out for her being nearby. If you're, for example, on a gen and you don't hear her heartbeat or whatever, this lets you know that she's nearby enough to be able to hit you with the dash. Right, now that we've discussed what the ambush is and what the ambush does, let's talk a little bit more about how you actually do it as a killer. So, like I said before, there were the 3 things. We're going to start off with talking about double back faking at a basic pallet loop. So, in a chase, as the Pig, the first thing you're going to want to do when you reach a pallet loop is to take control of the pallet. You want to be at the pallet side when you crouch. You want to be in the pallet or near the pallet when you crouch. Because if you don't start your dash on that side, then the survivor can simply just camp the pallet and get away with not being hit. So you're going to want to go to the pallet. Approaching the loop, crouch, and take control of the pallet. So no matter where they go, they're stuck on the other side of the loop. And simply what you're going to do is charge your dash facing in one direction, and then near the end of the charge up, you're going to spin around and then dash in the opposite direction and kind of like troll them or debate them into thinking you're going one way, when in reality, you actually go the other way. If you just dashed in one direction, it wouldn't really work because the survivor runs away from you. As you can see in the picture, the survivor would run away from you and be able to run back around to the pallet. So what you do is you fake one way and you go the other way, hence double back faking. You fake one way and go the other way. So they run away from you and you end up turning around and you can cut them off the other way. This dash actually works on pretty much every single pallet loop in the game, minus a couple of exceptions, really very small amount. It works on Shack, it works on every pallet loop, although Shack we'll discuss in more detail, because anyway, works on pretty much every single pallet loop in the entire game. There's a very, very small number of pallets in the game you can't dash on in this way. So once you get this basic double back faking down, you should be good. Naturally, this is just as basic as it comes. There's a lot more to it than this, you know, because they might run away, or in addition to this, double back faking also kind of works when the pallet is already thrown down. So the survivor will camp one side of the pallet waiting for you to break it. What you can do is walk over to the right or the left and stand in the middle of the loop, and you can dash towards the survivor, faking that way, and then actually going the other way, and you can cut them off as they vault the pallet. Again, it's double back faking, and again, it works, and it throws people off, and it allows you to get yourself a free hit on a lot of pallets in this game. It's very, very hard to traditionally loop a good pig. You have to be very smart with it as a survivor and break away from your loops, etc. As far as double back faking is concerned, it doesn't really matter whether or not the pallet loop has got LOS blockers, line of sight blockers, or whether or not it's like Blood Lodge where it's very, very open. You're able to double back fake on both tiles for different reasons, because on one they see, like on Blood Lodge, they see the direction you're facing, so they know to run. Say if you're going to dash clockwise around the loop, they know to run away from you. Whereas if you're on a map like Shelter Woods, where they cannot see you, when you actually start your dash, they see your red lights peek around a corner, so they know that they have to run away from the red light. So then you double back fake and you cut them off that way. So it doesn't really matter what the loop is. It doesn't matter if they can see you, if they can't see you. You just got to make sure you take control of the pallet. Again, this all works in jungle gyms, etc. like that as well, but we'll get into the more complex tiles later in the video. For now, though, I'm keeping it basic, and I'm sticking to the basic pallet loops in the game. Now, obviously, double back faking doesn't work on every single survivor in the game. Some of them have already figured out what you have to do against pig in those situations. And the best thing to do in that situation as a survivor is honestly run away. You just abandon the tile, abandon the loop. I'll discuss in more detail later in the video about how to play against pig as a survivor, but I'll keep referring to what you have to do throughout the video like that. So, like I said, running away from the loop works very well as a survivor, and as a pig, you need to keep in mind whether or not the survivor will abandon the tile, or whether or not they will stay. And this is kind of where the skill behind pig comes into it, is that you have to be able to read the survivor you're chasing. You've got to figure out what kind of survivor you have. Do you have the kind of survivor that's going to run away from a loop, or do you have the kind of survivor that's going to stay at a loop? If you think that this is the kind of survivor that runs, the other thing you can do instead of double back faking at a pallet tile is actually just baiting the ambush itself. You bait it, you roar at them, you give the impression you're going to dash, and then you stand up and you cancel the dash and you don't do it. And you can very often force them into an area, because you, as the pig, have the ability to decide in which direction the survivor runs away from the pallet loop. If you know you've got a runner, you can move around the loop crouched, or move around the loop standing up to the point where you know, say if you want them to run left because left's a dead zone, you'd move them around to the left point and then you would crouch and they will run and you can stand up and you'll get hit. So this ability to be able to decide where they run helps a lot with the survivors that just bail whenever you do it. You can bait the roar, like I said, you'll crouch, roar, they'll run. You can stand up and you often get a free hit from it. I'm now going to actually talk about the final basic thing that you need to learn about as a pig, and that is moon dashing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, pig can dash forwards, she can dash left, she can dash right, but she can't dash backwards traditionally. But the pig actually does have the ability to dash backwards. It's pretty neat and will help you a lot in Specifically, this is more aimed towards maze tiles where they can't see you, where they have a line of sight block. You moondash, you hide your red light, and you can get a lot of hits this way. Now you might be wondering, how, Scorpionz? How do you actually moondash? How do you actually dash backwards with Pig? Well, it's a bit weird in the sense that you actually need to be beside a building to do this. You can't actually moondash out in the open. You have to be next to a wall. And effectively, what you got to do is you look at the wall at a slight angle, and then you ambush dash. And then rather than holding down W when you dash, you're going to want to hold down the A button or the D button, depending on which way of the wall you're looking at. And you will, if you're looking at the right angle, you'll actually slide backwards down the wall, which is why I say it's useful in jungle gyms, because you can crouch next to a wall at a jungle gym, and then you can moondash backwards, and you can get the hit at the pallet. It works a lot of the time. It's pretty cool. It's a neat little trick that you can do with Pig, because not a lot of people know that you can dash backwards with her. It actually also works on pallet loops on big open maps like Blood Lodge, the double car loop. That one you can moondash a lot on instead of double back faking. Like, if the survivor's fallen for the double back fake once and you don't think they're going to fall for it twice, you can try moondashing and it actually will work on those situations as well. It works as well on other maze tiles. For example, a lot of those ones, the T&L walls, have got big ladder sight blockers. It works on them, and it works on the other pallet loop maze tile if you can time it right. Those three that we just talked about are kind of the main three parts on how to dash with Pig. And practicing those in different situations and combining the three of them, or even the two of them, allows you to pull off some pretty amazing things with her. Stuff that a lot of people playing against Pig don't really expect, because most pigs you go against, the standard Pig just runs around the loop like a normal killer. They don't crouch, they don't do anything, they don't try to use their power at all. It sucks, because this is a big, big part of her kit, and utilizing it and using it properly helps you out so much, and it sucks that no one really does it. Right, so I'm going to move on to the more advanced part of the dashing guide, which is explaining how to actually use and combine the three things in different situations, in different maze tiles and loops, etc. So those three things are kind of the basics to what you need to know about how to dash. Moondashing obviously is a bit more technical, but they're kind of the basic things that you need to know, but you also need to know how to use them in maze tiles, like I said, and in other tiles that are not traditional pallet loops, etc. Right, so let's start with T&L walls. This maze tile is featured on a lot of maps, pretty much all of them in fact, and this is very, very dashable and very easy to play out as the Pig. It requires using the three basic skills that you've already learned in the video, but combining them in order to pull it off. A lot of the time, it's often best to, well, first figure out what kind of survivor you're against. Are they a person that will run when you crouch, or are they a person that will stay at the tile? Typically, people will stay at maze tiles a lot more than pallet loops. Like, people will often abandon the pallet loop when you crouch, but on a maze tile, a lot of people will tend to stay. So at the T&L wall, what you're going to want to do is crouch quite early, and you don't actually need to dash straight away. It's often best to just walk around crouch, because in this stance, chase hasn't dropped, but you have no red light, etc. So it's often best to crouch straight away and start sneaking around, and then when you are at the bottom of the T, or the bottom of the L, that is where you will try and spot where the person is. On maps such as Autohaven, you can actually see through the maze tile. There's a lot of holes in the wall, which allow you to better predict where the survivors are. But if you're not on that map, it's often best to listen quite carefully for the footsteps of the survivor as to where they are. Again, as you've done throughout the entirety of the thing, you double back fake. You fake one way with the dashing, and you go the other way, and very often the survivor will run around the maze tile and walk straight into your dash. This works on the T, on the L, both of them. On the L side, you can actually also moondash along the L. You crouch down by the window side, and then you moondash backwards, and you can cut them off before they reach the window of the T. These things all work. These things are things that you can try against different sorts of survivors. Obviously, some survivors will fall for one thing, some survivors will fall for other things. In the example above, you can see that I combine crouching around, sneaking, like we talked about in the stealth and the crouching area, and then I combine that with the double back fake in order to actually get a hit on the survivor. And this is the kind of thing that separates a good Pig from a bad Pig. A good pig is able to use multiple different things at once, different parts of their power in order to get a hit. The guy couldn't see my red light, so he couldn't track where I was, and at the same time, when he did finally get a glimpse of me, he thought I was dashing one way, and then I faked around and was going the other way instead, because the chase hadn't dropped, and he couldn't hear my knife sheath away over the chase music, so he had no idea I was actually crouching, so he couldn't actually find me at all throughout the entire time, and I end up getting a free hit. Jungle gyms, etc. play out a lot like the same way, although it's often best to not actually dash at a jungle gym. It's always good to crouch here. Like, it's always good to crouch and hide your red light and sneak around, etc. But on certain tiles, certain jungle gyms, it's better to not actually dash, because very often they will just sneak past you and you just won't be able to connect the hit. But on certain tiles, in certain situations, certain scenarios against different survivors, it's actually worth it. So in the clip you see, again, I stay crouched for a while, walking around. I'm tracking them through the Colburn Farm maze tile because that is see-through, slightly see-through, so you can see where they are. I fake one way with the dash, and I go the other way. And they end up walking straight into my dash. Specifically, if the jungle gym is spawned in this particular variation with the window on the short L wall side of the jungle gym, you can actually moon dash along the side wall. So as you see in this clip in Macmillan, I crouch down on the window side of the jungle gym and then actually moon dash backwards and come across the area and get the hit. Because this guy saw my red light on the other side, so he cut back the other way, and he ended up running straight into my dash. And in some situations, if you time this right, or if the survivor times this wrong, you can actually get the pallet gone and get the hit. Like with a lot of things, it's because you're smaller, and it's because you have no red light. People underestimate just how strong it actually is that you can crouch, and then a second later, you have no red light at all. People just don't realize how disorientating that is as a survivor. Now, the shack is a tricky one to explain because it really, really depends on what sort of survivor you're playing against. But this is the tile that I will crouch, or I will dash, sorry, the least. I will often crouch down again and sneak around and hide my red light. But there's only really one or two situations where I'll ever actually dash. Now, to explain how to briefly run shack as a killer in general, it's always better for me personally to try and chase the survivor clockwise around shack, if we're looking at it from the top down, with the window on the bottom. It's always better to chase them clockwise so that they run into shack through the pallet doorway. Because that window there is very, very easy to play out from that side because it's got a short wall, and this is the situation where you can actually dash. They come in through the shack, you fake going into the shack with the dash, and you cut back and go along the outside of the shack wall, and you can hit them as they vault the window. Because they see your red light going into the shack, they panic, and they vault it, and you hit them. Depending on the survivor, if they figure out you're actually going to go into shack, you can actually just not fake and commit to it. And again, you can get a hit this way, but it really depends on the survivor you're playing against. The more experience you get with Pig, the more you'll kind of learn what survivor is what and what survivor will fall for what. But if you are being forced to loop the shack counterclockwise, because again, some survivors are decent at this and they will be able to make you run the way they want. If a survivor is running counterclockwise on the shack, crouching as you go up the long wall towards the doorway, and then walking into shack and then standing up again will often cause them to fake the window rather than vault it. Because what most survivors do is they will enter shack at the locker doorway, they will look behind them to see if there's a red light, and if there is a red light, they will vault the window. So what you do as Pig is you crouch, you hide your red light, and you walk into the shack, they look behind them, they see no red light, and then they fake vaulting the window because they think you're not there. And then it turns out you're actually at the doorway, and you can very often either dash or stand up and get the hit before they reach the pallet. And if you don't get the hit, then they will have to drop the pallet, otherwise they will get hit, and you can quickly deal with shack pallet in this way. Shack is a very fun tile to play out as Pig, and it often creates a lot of exciting mind games. A general M1 tip here for any M1 killer is that vaulting the window in shack is your friend. I'll often vault the window 2 or 3 times to try and debate someone into getting hit, because they will run and they will not expect the 3 vaults. People never expect a double or a triple vault. So they will run around the outside of the shack, and you just vault straight into them, and you can get the hit. Survivors that are good will run all around the back of the shack, back down to the shack pallet side to get to be looping the way they want. In this situation, again, being a general M1 killer is your friend, they have to go into the shack, and they'll either fault or fake the window, and you can bait them out either way. Now, as I said previously, it's good to crouch and hide your red light before walking into shack, although sometimes it's actually better to just go around the front to the window side anyway, because if the survivor's smart enough to figure out what you're doing, they'll still vault the shack window, even if they can't see a red light. So in that situation, it's better to just keep walking forwards and actually go around the outside of the shack to the window. Again, with the more you play shack with Pig, the more you will kind of get to see what sort of survivor's which. It's really hard to describe a good survivor, just outright. I'll be here for hours trying to explain that, but all I could say is the more you play Pig, or the killer in general, the more you can just kind of tell. You can just sort of feel when a survivor's is decent, or when they're gonna try stuff. It's so hard to describe, other than you just know when it is. You just know. The more you play, you can just tell. So that's what you've got to keep in mind, and that's how you know what sort of mind game you should be doing, of whether you should actually fake it, or just over-exaggerate and then go to the left, and then actually still get the hit through the window. Something I do as killer, and this is not just for Pig, this is for kind of every killer. When I personally play killer, I over-exaggerate everything I'm doing to the survivors. So, for example, running up to a T and L wall, I will make it very, very obvious to the survivor that I am cutting left, so the survivor will fake the window. And then what I actually do is, instead of cutting left, I just moonwalk on the wall and then get the hit anyway. So say I don't want the survivor to vault the window, I will massively over-exaggerate that I'm gonna go left. I'll be like, hey, survivor, I'm going left. You should totally fake the window. So they'll fake it, and then I just moonwalk backwards, and I'm like, just kidding. I had no intention of going left. And now I get a free hit because you thought that and faked the window instead. There's just little things like this that you just pick up through playing the game, and this is all just experience through playing the game. These are things that, well, now you know about it, you can try it, but these are just things that you pick up after a lot of hours of playing this game, trying different things, seeing if they work, seeing if they don't work. Right, so that's maze tiles and shack done. It's now time to move on to very briefly discuss building tiles, because Pig again shines on building tiles. Specifically tiles like Asylum, which have got a lot of drop downs, where rather than vaulting the window as the Pig, you can actually go upstairs and you can dash out of the window and you can get a hit very, very, very easily. Stuff like Grim Pantry or Pale Rose, building tiles like this where you can just try and vault things or try and get on top of things with Pig's dash. So again, on top of the pier, you can dash onto the wall and you can actually jump over the window. There's some pallets you can jump on Blood Lodge. There's some pallets you can jump on Chapel. There's various different cool things like this that you can do with the ambush, and honestly, none of them are particularly hard to do, the Harvester being another one. You just need to know they exist, and a lot of this is just trial and error. Personally, what I do is whenever a new map comes out, I go into Kill Your Friends with Pig, and I just dick about for like an hour, and I try and find different spots of what you can dash on and what you can't dash on. And then when I get into the game, I just try and hit them, and a lot of the time they work, and a lot of the time they don't. And then I know at that point what I can and can't do. In the background, there's going to be some clips showing you different ones you can do. I think that's going to be better than explaining them individually, because none of them are that hard. It's just once you know they exist, you can kind of do them and apply them at certain situations. Asylum is probably the trickiest one, because there's various different ones you can do, and a lot of them are based on kind of listening for the survivor. So you go upstairs a lot of the time, and then you listen for the footsteps downstairs to know where they vault and which way they go when they vault. But kind of once you get used to how footsteps work in this game, you can predict where they're going to be before you jump out of the window on the top floor. So for example, the infinite window on the right side of the asylum, very often the survivor is just going to try and run the infinite on you. So that's the predictability you have. You know exactly where they're going to be, so you, rather than vaulting the window after them, you go upstairs, you go to the drop down, and very often they're just going to be trying to run the window on you mindlessly without really thinking about it. And then they'll check behind them and they see that you're not there, and very often they will try and cut back to the window again rather than committing to the full loop, and this allows you to pounce off of the second floor and very often get the hit on the person by the window. It's just practice. The more you try these kind of things, the more you see that they kind of just fit together and work. In the preschool, you're able to also jump over the hole with the dash, and the best thing I can recommend with this is looking at how it's done in these clips, and then copying it yourself in a Kill Your Friends. If you can get a mate, you just keep trying it as it is in the video. You can slow it down and have a look frame by frame of how I do it, and then you'll be able to transfer that into the games that you play yourself. Honestly, it's just practice. Once you know these things exist, it's just practice and seeing how they're applied and where they're applied before you can do it yourself. Map she struggles on? Honestly, she struggles on anything that's quite large. So rotten fields that are huge maps but have also got very safe power loops, stuff like that, stuff like Cowshed. Cowshed being the worst because there are very little towers you can dash on at the time of this video. Stuff like Mother's Dwelling as well is quite hard because of its size. But there's also this kind of backwards thing. Sure, they're quite hard to win chases on and gain map pressure because they're really large, but at the same time, you're guaranteed to have 4 sword boxes that are really far apart from each other, so that it's more likely the survivors are going to die to the helmet and spend more time searching boxes for keys, etc. to try and remove them, because they're so far apart. It becomes like a double-edged sword kind of thing, where it's not really my kind of playstyle as Pig to enjoy that kind of gameplay, but if trap gameplay is your thing, then it totally could work for you, these kind of maps. It just really depends on the player that you are. Let's talk a little bit about how you actually play against the Pig as a survivor. As I've spoken a lot in detail about how to ambush and how to play around a lot of tiles, etc. But it's only fair to talk about how to also play against such mind games, etc. So if I'm going to start with a basic power loop, the most important thing you need to do as a survivor, as I've said already, is run away from the loop. But you don't just simply run away because the Pig will be able to bait you out and get you. So the best thing to do is to, when you approach a loop, have a plan as to where you're going to go next if the Pig tries to crouch. And if she does, the moment she starts crouching, you run. Sometimes you may not make the next area because the Pig has properly baited you out, but if the tiles are really compact, you should be able to make the next tile just about in time. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. That's the best thing you can do against a Pig that is crouching. You shouldn't really challenge a Pig on a pallet like that unless you absolutely have to, because you're probably not going to win a 50-50 with a Pig on that tile. Keep in mind she's probably going to double back fake, so you could try and get away with it, but even then it's really not a good idea to try and challenge a Pig on a pallet like that. It's always often better to try and abandon the tile and go to the next one. Now obviously in a jungle gym, etc., you've got a bit more to work with here, so if she crouches and tries to dash you in a jungle gym or a TNL wall, etc., it's always best to try and just keep a line of sight on her, or just try and keep tracking on her. It can be difficult without a red light, and it can be difficult because she's so tiny, but it's always important to try and keep line of sight on her. Stick to the corners of the TNL wall, so rather than running down the entire wall, wait at like a corner so you can see down both sides, so that you can try and see from 2 different angles where she is, and only once you see her, try and commit to a tile, try and commit to a side. If she's playing well, it's often you will also get hit in this situation, not always, but sometimes, so depending again on the situation, if you've got an exit plan, it's always best to try and abandon the tile to the next one. And the last thing is, when you're sitting on a gen, if you know that the killer is a Pig, you need to try and look behind you in a lot of tiles. Like if you're in a corner of the map, and you don't normally traditionally look behind you because there's no killer there, looking behind you in these areas will still help you, because the Pig could sneak around the back and then go from the grab at the back as well. And keep an eye out for the sheath sound, keep an eye out for that noise, because you know the Pig is right next to you, and you'll end up getting hit rather than getting grabbed, which is the better scenario for you as a survivor. And in order to prevent all of that, she also actually breathes very loud, so you can try and listen out for her breathing, although it does sound very, very similar to a Claudette's, so if you can't hear that in every situation, then you are excused. This is like where a lot of the fun of playing against a Pig comes from, is when a Pig is actively trying to hit you with her power all the time. You have to be so alert as a survivor to keep constantly tracking where she is in order to keep dodging all the hits. It's honestly so fun to play against, and you can do so many cool mind games with her and against her. And this is the cool part of her that you just don't get to see that often, because a lot of people just don't use the power very often. And this is partly why her power works so well against survivors, is because a lot of pigs don't do it. If all the pigs probably did it, a lot of survivors would dodge a lot more hits, but because so many people don't use her power at all, a lot of survivors just have no clue what to do against it, and they panic, and they end up getting hit from it. Right, so we should discuss add-ons now. The thing with Pig's add-ons is a lot of them just aren't that great, to be completely honest. A lot of them either buff the traps or are all just status effect add-ons, which have very little impact on gameplay. There are some neat little builds to do with them, but the truth is the majority of the add-ons simply just affect the helmets and make the helmets better, rather than actually improving how the dash works, etc. I feel like I should rant about Pig's add-ons in a separate video, but I'll keep things short for now. For the most part, I just wish a lot of her add-ons affected the dash and didn't affect the traps. But anyway, I've made this little chart here to kind of explain what a lot of the add-ons do. I'm going to go through a lot of them very briefly, but I will talk about a few in detail. Now, my two personal favourite add-ons with the pig are the combat strap and the shattered syringe, both of which are chase add-ons, both of which are brown rarity. The thing with Pig is that a lot of her add-ons are actually better lower rarity, which is really weird. Like, one of her ultra rare add-ons is utterly garbage. Again, we'll get to that later. But her best add-ons are brown and yellow, pretty much, for dashing. Now, the combat strap reduces the time it takes to crouch and to stand up by 0.3 seconds. That might not seem like a lot, but that add-on is insane when you get the dashing down. It is so crazy, and it is honestly the add-on you're going to want to use all the time on Pig. It works great with learning, and even when you've learned, it's still so much fun to use. It allows you to bait pallet loops a lot more efficiently, it allows you to stand up quicker, and they don't gain anywhere near as much distance on you when they try and run away from the loop if you bait the dash. The shattered syringe reduces the cooldown of the ambush dash by 25% when you miss. So it reduces it from a 2-second cooldown when you miss to a 1.5 second cooldown. That is a significant amount for a brown add-on. That's a lot. 25% is a lot for a brown add-on. And so you pair these two together so you can crouch quicker and you can dash quicker because of the crouch. And then if you miss, you're not punished as heavily for missing. So it allows you to be a lot more ambitious and allows you to experiment a lot more with the dash. At least that's how I learned how to dash. Because back when I learned how to dash, you needed the combat strap because the base crouch was so bad. But that was a long time ago. But Scorpionz, why don't you run the videotape when the videotape is literally the shattered syringe but better and a charge add-on as well? The videotape reduces cooldown by 25%, just like shattered syringe, but it also decreases the charge time by 50%, which is a ridiculously high amount for an add-on, by the way. Can I just point that out? Again, ranting from another video. Anyway, I don't use this because charge add-ons affect your muscle memory. At least they affect my muscle memory personally. So I don't like using videotape at all because I feel like you learn the videotape and then you can't play without it. Same thing with the medical file. You learn it because that's also 50%, but that's not a cooldown as well. It's just a flat 50. So you learn how to use with these add-ons and you can't really dash without it, and I just don't like it. I personally think double back faking is harder with a charge add-on as well, which is another reason to not really use them. Like, you can use them if you want, but I really don't recommend using a videotape over a shattered syringe just because it can affect your muscle memory and it can affect how efficiently you can double back fake. Amanda's Letter is actually a pretty good add-on. A lot of people say this add-on sucks, but it's actually a very good add-on, specifically on Larry's and on Hawkins. It's like a jump scare pig with combat strap. But like, aside from the jump scaring, which is a lot of fun, by the way, you should try that out if you ever get the chance. Aside from the jump scaring, it can be a very good add-on to learn how to dash. So if you go on a maze tile with Amanda's Letter and you crouch, you can see them through the wall and you can kind of see how a survivor reacts to a pig being crouched. So you can kind of learn as to what they're doing, and if you use it a lot, you kind of can predict from that point on what a survivor's going to do once you remove that add-on, because they're going to react in the same way whether or not you can see them with the aura or whether you can't see them. So it's a neat little thing. Now obviously this add-on reduces your saw boxes by 2 and reduces your helmets by 3. So you're not going to win that many games with this if you're not playing on Larry's, for example. I wouldn't really recommend adding an extra box. I'd recommend going full-on combat strap dashing, because that's the best way you're going to get out of it. You might as well increase the benefits of using this add-on rather than reducing the downside, because the downside's so heavy that there's no point reducing one of the two, because the other downside's still so bad. So you might as well just buff the upside of the add-on, and using the combat strap allows you to see their auras better. Last wills, and one of my favorite add-ons as well, a 5th helmet is a lot of extra slowdown, and it's something that's really, really neat and really, really overlooked for a yellow add-on. It's super good if you feel like you're just not getting enough slowdown with Pig at base, and you don't run slowdown perks like I don't. Last Will is a very good option for you as well. It's a super cool one. Again, pairing that with a combat strap or a shattered syringe, or the green extra box add-on is a really nice little combo. Sadly, the rest of her add-ons are all pretty... The rest of her add-ons I don't really use because I personally just don't find them fun. I'm the kind of person where if I don't like playing against it as Survivor, I don't like running it as Killer, and add-ons that add extra boxes and slow down and increase the timer are just really not fun. So Tampered Timer is easily her strongest add-on. It is so insanely strong, way too strong, but I refuse to use it, and I hate talking about it even in this guide because it is that good of an add-on. I often compare it to something like Eerie Heads of that kind of strength. Like, obviously Eerie Heads is stronger, but with the way the Tampered Timer works, it reduces the trap time by 30 seconds. So if your helmet is active from the beginning and it's the last box to remove it, you're not going to get it off in time. You can only really search 3 boxes efficiently with Tampered Timer active. So if it's the 4th or even 5th box, if you're really going that overkill with these add-ons, you're going to die. And I hate this kind of thing, personally. It's just, to me, the Tampered Timer, the Jigsaw Sketch, and the Creative Gears, to me, ruin an otherwise pretty perfectly designed killer, and I absolutely can't stand that these add-ons exist. Anyway, that's enough of me ranting about those, because I could talk about that for a while. The Blindness add-on is pretty damn strong. You can do a really, really strong slugging build with this, with Knockout and Deerstalker with these add-ons. Again, not something I would run, because I don't like playing against it as Survivor, but it's definitely a build you can do. The Mangled add-on is pretty useless because people don't really tend to heal with a helmet on anyway, and since you shouldn't really be chasing trap people, it doesn't really matter that they're injured, and the Mangled effect is removed once the helmet has gone away. Same thing with the Exhaustion add-on. There's no real reason for it to exist, no real reason to use it, because again, people that have helmets on shouldn't really be chased, so it doesn't really matter that they're exhausted. It's not like causes exhaustion for 40 seconds after the helmet's gone. It's just exhausted while the helmet's active, so once the helmet's been removed, the exhaustion goes away. You shouldn't really chase them, because chasing a trap person you're just losing time, because the other people that are not trapped are doing gens. Amanda's Secret is another add-on that's just not very good. It just doesn't do anything. It removes your ability to see saw boxes, but at the same time doesn't really give you a benefit that's worth that, so again, don't really use it. Fun. And lastly, we have the rule set number 2. Now, this add-on is pretty controversial in the sense that if you go on Reddit and if you go on the forums, a lot of people say that they want this add-on base kit with Pig, but I actually disagree with them. I think this add-on makes playing Pig harder, or is at least pretty counterintuitive. People want this add-on base kit, and for those who don't know what it does, it removes the ability for survivors to see auras of the Jigsaw box until the helmet is active. This is the only way you can actually remove auras for survivors. Blindness status effect does not remove the box auras for a survivor. But Josh, why do you think this add-on sucks so much? Well, to explain, it changes the priority of the helmet for the survivor. The first thing a survivor typically does when they're trapped and they are unhooked is they go and remove the helmet. Obviously, they don't die from it because they're busy removing it while it's inactive, but still, they are prioritizing doing the helmet over doing a gen. What this add-on does is it changes the priority. They get off the hook, they can't see the saw boxes, so they just think, okay, I'm gonna go do a gen. And then they go and do a gen with a helmet on. Yeah, there's a slightly higher chance of them dying, but even then, it's just really, to me, it just seems really counterintuitive. Like, if it's not even that good of a head pop add-on, because if you wanted head pops, like I said earlier, you've just got to use timer and sketch is lower rarity. So even then, it's still not that good of an add-on. It's still outclassed by add-ons of a lower rarity than it. It's just pointless, and I really hope this doesn't get made base kit. I just dislike this add-on. But honestly, that's kind of all there is to the add-ons. Like I said, a lot of them just are status effects, and they're not that fun. But the combat strap, the needle, the shattered syringe, the letter, the last will, there are some fun add-ons there. There are some fun builds there, and depending on what your perk setup is, you can make a lot of these add-ons work, depending on your playstyle. Just don't be a head pop pig, please. Don't be that guy. No one likes that guy. Now, the last thing to discuss is perks, and the builds that I run, and why I run the builds that I run. Now, there's a lot of perks in this game, and there's way too many to talk about and way too many to go through, so I figured that the best way to do this would be to split them up into categories of what the perks actually do, and kind of talk about the categories in general, and then let you build a build from that. That being said, I am going to talk about the 4 perks that I use in my main build, and then I'm going to talk about the main build in general. My main build on Pig is Brutal Strength, Enduring, Martyr and Abuse, and Whispers. Now, the standard Pig build, or the meta Pig build if you like, is Enduring, Whispers, and Martyr and Abuse, and then the 4th perk is kind of just whatever. I use Brutal Strength, but it could be whatever the hell. For me, it's 2 perks that aid chase and 2 perks that aid stealth, with 1 perk that aids tracking as well as stealth, and I'll explain about that in a minute. Brutal and Enduring, I don't really feel like I need to explain because sod parts. Whispers is a bit more of an explanation though, but Josh, it's just Whispers, it's a tracking perk. Yes, but this perk also aids with my stealth. Like I said before, Pig's terror radius is 32 meters. Whispers is also 32 meters. I tend to crouch the moment Whispers turns on, because you shouldn't really be crouching all the time as Pig, because crouching is very slow, it's very inefficient, and you're going to waste a lot of time that you could be using for map pressure. So I crouch when Whispers turns on, because that definitely means someone is nearby. But because Pig's terror radius is 32 meters, and Whispers is 32 meters, if I didn't run Martyr and Abuse, the survivors that are on gens would briefly hear my heartbeat while it fades away, because the heartbeat doesn't start to fade until the crouch animation is finished. So there's a solid 1.3 seconds of them just being able to hear my heartbeat. So to remove that 1.3 seconds, I use Martyr and Abuse to get rid of that, because the heartbeat starts to fade from 24 meters with M&A rather than 32 meters at base. Which is why I run M&A on Pig on a stealth killer. I frequently get questions on my stream about why I use M&A on a stealth killer. Well, now you know. That's why. It's super cool. It's a neat build. Like I said, the 4th perk in my build is Brutal Strength, but this could be this is a throwaway perk, so you can have anything. The standard 4th perk is Barbecue, so Barbecue, Enduring, M&A, Whispers. Again, that's the standard one. I don't run it because I've got everything in the game. I don't need points. I personally quite like I'm All Ears in that slot. I have a lot of fun with I'm All Ears actually on Pig, a lot of fun. Excluding the M&A Whispers build, I like running Surveillance and Ruin on Pig as well, because people tend to 99 generators against helmets because they're scared of the timer. So you run Ruin in this situation because they let go of the gen, and then the gen just starts regressing with Ruin. And you can see the gen with Surveillance. So you have a lot of fun with Ruin on Pig. The new Ruin is so much fun, by the way. I want to talk a little bit about Save the Best for Last, because I get a lot of questions on stream about why I don't think Save the Best for Last is a very good perk on Pig. And honestly, if you like it on Pig, that's great. But for me, I don't like it. It works on some builds, so basically the idea of Save the Best for Last is that when you go for a gen grab, if you fail your gen grab for whatever reason, whether that be because you missed or because dedicated servers, Save the Best for Last kicks in and gives you a quick weapon wipe and gets you back into chase quicker. But I really don't think, even then, it's not that useful, because you might as well just eat the extra time it gives you, because other than this one specific situation, you don't really use it, because you should be dashing. The way I see it with Pig, at least with my playstyle and the way this guide suggests, a third of your hits are going to be dashing, about a third of your hits. a third of your hits are gonna get tanked with Enduring anyway, if you run my build, and then the other third of your hits are gonna be affected by Save the Best for Last. So, like, it's a good perk, but I just think there's a lot better out there for Pig. If you want to do, like, an endgame Pig build, like, these exist. Like, endgame Pig is not removed, for those of you that think it is. Endgame Pig's a proper thing still. You can run Noed, you can run Blood Warden, you can run Remember Me, etc. And all you have to do is trap at 1 gen. It's much more of a high-risk, high-reward build now. Whereas before, it was quite easy. You just trapped at the end. There was no thought behind it. It's much more of a high-risk, high-reward build now. You trap at 1 gen. It's a super big risk trapping at 1 gen. And then if the traps work, you get rewarded big time for it. So perks like Noed, perks like Remember Me, perks like Blood Warden especially are very good if you want to do an endgame perk build. It's niche. Obviously, you shouldn't really endgame trap that often with Pig, because that's not really what they're for. But it's a neat little thing you can do as well. With the actual build I use of M&A Whispers Enduring, that 4th perk slot, you can have anything. So, like, Devour Hope works in that slot. Make your choice. Agi, if you wanted it. There's so many things you can do. There's a lot of choices in that 1 perk slot. Or if you want to go something else, then that's cool as well. But I recommend Whispers a lot on her, and I recommend Martyr a lot, just so that you can be extremely efficient with your crouching, so that you can spend as little time crouched and as much time standing as possible, because there's a big difference between 3.6 ms and 4.6 ms. A big difference. Enduring as well, I love, because tanking pallets and getting rid of pallets easily as a chasing killer like Pig is super, super important in my opinion. So I love Enduring on her. One of my favorite perks in the game in general. You get so much benefit out of it. As it stands right now, I wouldn't really swap it for anything. Now, if you want to run Whispers alone, it is actually possible to do this. It just wastes you a lot more time. So my Ruin build is Ruin, Enduring, Surveillance, Whispers. And it is possible to play with Whispers on Pig without M&A. It just requires extra steps. So once Whispers turns on, you have to back up out of the terror radius. And once Whispers turns off again, you crouch and then walk forwards again, just to make sure your heartbeat is as faint as possible. It wastes you 5 or 6 seconds, and those 5 or 6 seconds are a big waste. It adds up, but it is the thing you can do if you don't want to run M&A in my build for whatever reason. You've got different ideas for a build. I know a few people that can't run M&A because it gives motion sickness, etc. Play with your food Nemesis is actually super fun as well on Pig. These work, so play with your food affects the dash speed. So you can run Nemesis, Enduring, play with your food Whispers is a build I run. And you can dash at light speed. Like, your dash is super fast with this build. You get a lot more distance, and you can hit survivors that really don't expect you to be going that fast. The build is all very fun, and because she's a stealth killer, you have the ability to drop chase with your obsession relatively easily, so you can gain stacks of play with your food a lot easier than other killers can as well. I run that with combat strat to be supersonic speed piggy. It's a really fun build as well. There's a lot of different builds out there you can try. Personally, I would avoid using slowdown perks on the Pig, purely because her built-in slowdown that she already has is very, very good. You can run a slowdown perk if you want, I guess, but I really wouldn't recommend it, because you might as well, with an already built-in slowdown, expand your perks into other areas that she's weaker on, such as map mobility, so Whispers, and perks that build up your chasing ability and allow you to down survivors and put your slowdown on them faster. So while Pop is an amazing perk, I feel like it's pretty overkill on Pig, considering how strong the built-in slowdown she's got. It already is. I know some of you are going to disagree with me with that, by the way. Before I go, I just want to briefly say a big thank you to everyone that's helped me put this guide together. All of you Pig nerds in my Discord, I see you. L as well, thank you very much for editing the video together, etc. And thank you guys for being patient with me. I know this guide is very late after how long I started streaming, but it's out now. I'm super happy, and I can't wait to read the comments in the description. Please remember to leave a like. Please remember to sub. I stream daily on Twitch. Come and check me out if you are new to my YouTube channel and don't know me. As always, I'm Scorpionz, and take care, guys.